Good morning. May I warmly welcome you all to our virtual Holocaust Memorial Day commemorative event for 2022, which this year the theme is One Day. Yet again, we find ourselves in what we are in a rather unusual circumstance, as we normally would meet in our council chamber here at the Quadrant. But for a second year, we are delivering a virtual event in order to protect us all from the pandemic. We use this time to reflect upon what we can learn from the past, and I'm grateful that you are here with us at our annual commemorative event. We, on this occasion, remember how after the horrors of war, society and communities were rebuilt, and how we tried to learn from past history. Our North Tyneside Holocaust Memorial Day Working Group always endeavour to raise awareness regarding tolerance and understanding, challenging racism and prejudice, promoting equality, as well as remembering the Holocaust and all those other genocides. This recognises what genocide does. It just doesn't happen, but there's always a path which leads to genocide. I'm sure that we can learn from these and more recent events and not just return to normal everyday life, but we must build a better future for all. With that in mind, I'm pleased to welcome all of you and all of the contribution to today's presentation. And I'm sure that we will all hear a lot about what they've learned from looking back through our history and the impact of the Holocaust, as well as other genocides.
It's my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual Holocaust Memorial Day commemorative event 2022. The theme of this year's event is One Day, and I very much look forward to all your contributions. I'm delighted so many of you have been able to contribute to this year's virtual service, and would like to thank everyone involved for helping making this happen. I would particularly like to thank Trevor Avery, the keynote speaker. Every year we hear so many incredible moving stories and words from the speaker. We are lucky enough to have to join us. I'm sure this year will be no different. I would also like to thank Rabbi Lipsy, Rabbi Sybil Sheridan, and young Mayor Susie McKenzie, who will speak today. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to acknowledge the important work undertaken by the Holocaust Memorial Group, particularly Rob Smith, Melody Bryan, from the Council's school support team. I would like to thank this group of staff for their work and commitment to this event. Each year we have the support of our children from our local schools. Although you will have seen the school's logos on the PowerPoint display, I would like to make a special welcome to Bailey Green Primary, Balliol Primary, Burden Primary, Carville Primary, Grasmere Primary, Long Benton High, Monkhouse Primary, New York Primary, Star of the Sea RC Primary, St Aidan's RC Primary, St Stephen's RC Primary, St Thomas More High, and the Virtual Youth Choir. I would now like to introduce Councillor Muriel Green, who is the chair of the Holocaust Memorial Working Group and who has taken you through the service today.
My thanks to elected Mayor Norma Redfern for that welcome, and also to Councillor David Drummond, the Chair of North Tyneside Council. But I would like to offer a special thanks to all of those who support our work, our schools, our council staff, our parents and our communities. The theme for this year's event is One Day. The aftermath of the Holocaust and of subsequent genocides continues to raise challenging questions for individuals, communities and nations. The theme, One Day, encourages audience to reflect on how we must all come together and stand up for the rights of people not to be bullied, oppressed and exploited. How we must be that light of hope and help and strive to remove people's inhumanity to others. On Holocaust Memorial Day 2022, will reflect on what happens when individuals, families and communities are threatened by oppressors with persecution or genocide, alongside the continuing difficulties survivors face as they try to find and build new lives when the genocide is over. Today we are remembering those who are forced to live through these experiences. We honour those who died and were persecuted under the persecution of the Nazis. And we also remember those who have suffered in subsequent genocides in Cambodia, Bosnia, Rwanda, Darfur, and more recently, the ongoing conflict in Syria. Holocaust Memorial Day enables us to reflect on the lessons of the past and the present and make a commitment, both personal and collectively, for the future. To start our proceedings, I'd now like to invite Rabbi Aaron Lipsey to share with us a few words about this event, as well as a prayer.
I'll now say the memorial prayer in English and then in Hebrew. Almighty God, full of mercy who dwells on high, provide a sure rest upon the wings of the divine presence, within the levels of the holy and the pure, whose countenance shines like the sky. The souls of the 6 million Jews who were murdered, slaughtered, burnt and exterminated for the sanctification of your name by the Nazi assassins and their collaborators. Let the Garden of Eden be their repose. May the Master of Mercy protect them forever in the protective shelter of his wings, and bind their souls with the bond of life. Hashem is their heritage, and they shall rest peacefully where they fell. And let us say, Amen. Keil moli rachamim, shoichein b'amaroimim, hamitzei menuchen achoin al kanfei ashchina, b'malois kedoshim, utahoirim, kazoihar, horokia mazhirim, es nishmois, Hashishim ribu Yehudim, shenehergu, v'shenishchatu, v'shenisrufu, v'shenisufu al kiddush Hashem. Began Eden teimunu chasam, lochein bal rachamim, yastireim b'seisek nalfav le'olamim, v'yitzroer b'tzroer achayim es nishmoiseim, Hashem unachalasam, v'yanuchu v'shalom al mishkavam, v'noimar. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Aaron Lipsey, for that once again a thought-provoking contribution to begin our events. I'd like to welcome our first presentation from Year 5 pupils of Balliol Primary School to present to us some of their work around prejudices of the past and present.
We have been talking about the Holocaust Memorial Day. We have learned about Kristallnacht, which roughly translates as the night of the broken glass. On Kristallnacht, German people broke in windows of synagogues and Jewish-owned businesses. This was because Germany was under the rule of the Nazis, who didn't like Jewish people because they were different.
We have learned the story of Gabrielle Keelan, who was one of many children sent away to protect them from the Nazis. Gabrielle was born in Vienna in 1926. She came from a family of a Catholic mother and a Jewish father. These children were called Michelin children. When she was young, her mother died, so she was raised by her grandmother.
Kristallnacht happened the night before her 12th birthday. Her grandmother sent her away on Kindertransport because she was scared that she couldn't keep Gabrielle safe. Gabrielle went on a train with 150 other children. Each child wore a label so they could be recognized. They travelled from Germany to Liverpool, England. This took them a whole week.
None of the children could speak English. Can you imagine how scary she would have been? Not only she had been separated from her grandma, but she was in a new place where she didn't know anyone and couldn't understand anyone. In her bag, her grandma had left her
packet of paper, some envelopes and a pen so they could write to each other. As Gabrielle grew up, she learned English and eventually trained to become a teacher. Luckily, the story has a happy ending, and she was reunited with her grandmother. Interestingly, Gabrielle went on to become a head teacher in the North Tyneside. She is now reunited and speaks to people about her childhood. We think she is amazing.
Many thanks to the pupils for their work today. They have clearly thought about the issues and experiences that war and conflict cause and the impact they can have upon us all. I'd now like to introduce the pupils from New York Primary who in Year 6 have been looking at Kristallnacht and its impact.
Holocaust Memorial Day takes place each year on the 27th of January. It marks the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi death camp.
The theme for this year is One Day. At New York, we decided to look at one day in history and learn all about it.
We chose the 9th of November 1938, also known as Kristallnacht.
Starting in the late hours of the night on November the 9th and continuing into the next day, the Nazis began a pogrom against Jewish people living in Germany.
A pogrom is an organised mob attack against a group of people, especially Jews.
Nazi mobs torched and vandalised hundreds of synagogues throughout Germany and damaged, if not completely destroyed, thousands of Jewish homes, schools, businesses, hospitals and cemeteries.
An estimate of 91 Jews were killed and 30,000 were arrested. 297 synagogues were destroyed.
The streets of Jewish communities were littered with shards of broken glass. This is where the name Kristallnacht came from. It means crystal night in German.
During the riots, Nazi officials ordered German police and firemen to do nothing. They stood and watched as the Jewish people were attacked and homes destroyed and the buildings demolished.
Shockingly, firefighters were only allowed to extinguish blazes which were threatening German-owned properties.
Throughout the night, approximately 30,000 Jewish men were publicly humiliated as they were arrested and transported to concentration camps.
At these camps, Jews were subject to vicious assault and torture. As many as 1,000 died from the brutal treatment they received.
Furthermore, in a cruel twist, the Nazi government forced the Jewish to pay for the destruction of their own businesses and homes. The camp prisoners were only released if they promised to leave the country.
Kristallnacht marked a turning point in history towards more violent treatments of Jews by the Nazis.
By the end of 1938, Jews were banned from schools and most public places such as cinemas and shops.
We chose to bring an awareness to the day known as Kristallnacht because many have described it as the beginning of the Holocaust.
Kristallnacht is a day we must never forget. Thank you for listening to New York Primary School.
Many thanks to the pupils from New York Primary for their engaging and thought-provoking interpretation about this year's theme. And can I stress at this point that the children and pupils work on their own interpretations throughout the year, and that's why you'll see so many different contributions. I'd like to welcome pupils of Bailey Green Primary School to present us with some of their poetry around the theme One Day.
Hello, we are Bailey Green and these are our poems for one day in the future.
One day I will run free. One day I will play in the streets I once called home. One day I will laugh. One day I will explore the world. One day I will find justice. One day I will live my dreams.
One day I'll live my dreams. One day I will laugh. One day I'll play in the streets I once called home. One day I will see my family. One day life will be fair. One day genocide will end and it will all be behind us. One day I will have a voice louder than ever. One day I will be a person again.
One day I will have freedom. One day I will have a family. One day I will do the things I love. One day I will be called by my name. One day I will live my dreams I once dreamt. One day I will set footprints in the sand of my family.
One day I'll have no targets on my back. One day we'll have fun again. One day I will feel safe. One day I'll get to sleep safely. One day I will laugh. One day I can have fun and a bright life.
One day I will be free from my cage. One day I will have a life like I've always wanted. One day I will be my happiest. One day I will be free from this poverty. One day I will be loved again. One day I won't be someone they laugh at. One day I'll find a safe home. One day I'll be out of the Nazis' grasps. One day I'll be educated. One day I'll be healthy and safe. One day the world will be peaceful. One day I will finally be happy.
Many thanks to the pupils from Bailey Green Primary School for the creative way in which they have presented their interpretation of One Day. Thank you, Bailey Green. I'd now like to invite pupils from Carville Primary School to share the work that they have undertaken. This includes artwork based upon a letter to the future explaining about prior genocides. Thanks to the pupils from Carville Primary for their contribution. Well done. Now this year, again, we have created a special virtual HMD youth choir. The pupils from a wide variety of schools will sing Just One Day. I am sure that you will agree that the words from the song are really moving. The children and staff team have done an amazing job here, and we will get a chance to hear the song again later in the programme. Our special thanks are offered to the North Tyneside Music Education Hub for their contribution. You can imagine to undertake the coordination of a task such as a virtual choir is not easy. May I offer our sincere gratitude to the efforts of all involved with this. I'd now like to introduce Burridon Primary School. Many thanks to the pupils and staff for their contribution from this school. Now it's the turn of Monkhouse Primary School.
As we approach another year of remembrance, another year to reflect, and another year to raise our historical awareness, we engage in a day of memorial for those lives lost as a result of the Holocaust, as well as those lives fallen in other genocides and through the war. In our approach to the theme One Day, we decided to reflect on these past events and include modern day suffering in light of the Civil War. Our story sees a child walking through these moments as she voices her fears, thoughts and dreams for a better future, a world where suffering is no more. We created our response through the use of animation, where each child in our class drew a still frame taken from a video recording and then pieces, these all together in a central keynote project. These files were then exported so that they acted as a flipbook. The background images then created the illusion that the animated child was walking through this history as she spoke. We hope that our emotive projects leaves you with the time to reflect and with the lasting impact it had on us. Thank you.
One day they will take my precious possessions away from me.
One day they will take my heart and my soul away from me.
One day they will take my clothes.
One day they will take everything I love in an instant.
One day they will take my hope and my courage.
One day they will rip me away from my family.
One day they will take my happiness away.
One day they will take my playful life away from me.
One day they will take my hair and my shoes away from me.
One day they will take away my future.
One day they will take my family, my freedom, and my home.
One day I dream of going home and seeing my family.
One day I dream of peace.
One day I dream of a place where death could never come near me.
One day I dream of walking outside of the camps. One day I dream of a place where I could call home.
One day I dream of growing my hair long again.
One day I dream of no abuse.
One day I dream of no fences between me and freedom.
One day I hope to go to school and make some new friends.
One day I hope for all terror to stop.
One day I hope I will overcome my fears. One day I hope to have happiness again.
One day I hope for all war to end.
One day I hope it will all be over. One day I dream suffering is no more.
Once again, thank you very much, Monkhouse Primary School, for your contribution to this day's event. I am now delighted to welcome our guest speaker for the year, Mr. Trevor Avery. Trevor is going to tell us about the work he is involved with in sharing the important messages we wish to convey and a unique project he curates in the Lake District.
Greetings from the Lake District on Holocaust Memorial Day 2022. The theme for this year, I know, is one day, and I want to focus it on these young people behind me. Look like holidaymakers, don't they? Enjoying the Lake District. And boy, were they enjoying the Lake District. The freedom. Because these had recently been liberated from the concentration camps. This is a small group from a much larger gathering of 300 youngsters who came to the Lake District in August 1945. They've been taken, ripped from their families, separated from them, and used as slave labour across occupied Europe for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. They completely lost track of where their families were. And they arrived here and began to feel what it was like to hope again. When in the camps, they will tell you that you had to take each day one day at a time. You couldn't afford to think of the future. You had so much to deal with, just surviving the day. When they came to the Lake District, the freedom and the glorious landscape and the food and the care they received meant they could dare to dream again. Dare to dream that they may meet their families again. Dare to dream that their communities, it may not be as bad as they thought or hoped. But it was. A few weeks after staying here, they began to receive letters as to what had happened to their families and what had happened to their communities. And those first few weeks were like a holiday for them. And after that, they had to come to terms with such an uncertain future. But the Lake District was a place where they could both celebrate their survival and they could grieve in private. But we were very lucky. We were left with a written account by one of the carers, Marie Peneth. She wrote a book, Rock the Cradle, that we discovered in the US Library of Congress archives, can you believe? And she talks about Windermere Reception Camp. And she talks about that one day when these youngsters emerged into the Lake District. I'm going to read it to you. And you'll see that from the darkness of the Holocaust, you get the occasional glimmer of light. It's rare, but it's there and it fills us with hope. The hostel was situated at the bottom of a flat valley which widened towards Lake Windermere. It consisted of orderly rows of barracks with tidy lanes between them. The surrounding mountainsides were covered by woods, and the valley itself was partly grassland, partly gardens belonging to the occupants of the camp. These people had been employed in the aircraft factory nearby for some years, but were now working a very restricted schedule, which is how we had succeeded in obtaining the accommodation in the unmarried quarters. The married quarters were still occupied by the workers' families. On the 15th of August, the weather was brilliant, but none of our new guests could venture out as their clothes were not yet back from the fumigation vans. Only the children of the English families were playing in the lanes as usual. By noon, the whole picture had changed. Our boys and girls started to swarm out, and immediately the local population turned up, showing their curiosity about the boys and girls of whose whereabouts they had been informed. They had expressed a willingness to bear with us at a meeting we had held to make contact and establish the necessary friendly relationship with those whom they might have considered our intruders. There were, of course, grave misgivings on both sides as to how it would be to have former young concentration camp inhabitants among the ordinary British working class population. Despite the misgivings, it worked very well indeed. Our boys and girls could hardly believe it when they learned that these friendly people were English folks and not Jews, and that they did not mind when they borrowed their bicycles for a ride, and indeed afterwards offered them the use of them spontaneously, who stopped in the lanes to teach them laughingly a few words of English, who invited them into their homes and even installed a wireless set for them in the open, so that a large group could listen to the talks in Polish. It all made a great impression on them. This is a good country, they said. These are good people. What a fantastic story. A glimmer of light, a beacon that shines from the Holocaust. But make no mistake, these children, given half a chance, would like to have stayed behind, would like to have grown up with their families, grown up with their communities, and blossomed. But they lost their childhoods. They lost their families. They lost their communities. We can't underestimate the enormous help, the enormous support that they felt when they were in Windermere. People helping them at the very beginning of their recuperation, the very beginning of their new lives. So there are many lessons from this story, but the one I take from it is when a stranger in need arrives in your community, help them, support them. Don't turn your back on them. Because one day, you may be a stranger to someone else, and you may need help. And you would hope that that stranger would provide it to you. By helping each other, we all become stronger. And we can hope that one day there are no more genocides. There are no more atrocities. I know it's a dream. I know it's fanciful. To some people it seems so. But if we all welcome strangers in need, surely that's the first step on the way to eradicating hatred and intolerance from our lives. Goodbye from the Lake District.
Many thanks from us all to Trevor for sharing the work that you do. Someday we will meet, because so far we haven't been able to meet in person, but you have contributed to our event on 2 occasions. I think this has really helped us to think about the theme of one day and reinforce the need to commit to help create positive life experiences through supporting each other. It also reminds us of sharing our history from generation to generation and to celebrate what good can be created and evolve from what was originally so evil. Thank you, Trevor. I'd now like to invite pupils from Grasmere Academy to share the work that they've been doing on this year's theme.
This is Grasmere Academy's class poem called One Day. One day there will be no racism. One day there will be no discrimination.
One day there will be no prejudice.
One day there will be no bullying.
One day there will be no hatred.
One day there will be no pain.
One day there will be no disappointment.
Always remember the victims of the Holocaust.
The work of children in our schools is so moving, and I thank the children from Grasmere Academy for their presentation. I'd now like to invite pupils from St. Thomas More Roman Catholic High School to share the work that they've undertaken. We have 3 Year 13 pupils who want to share with us their own interpretation of one day through the eyes of people of the past.
One day in the life of a Jew in Germany, 1933. When Hitler and the Nazi Party came to power in 1933, the lives of Jewish people, as well as many others, were going to have to be changed for the worse. In pre-concentration camp time, those one singular days living under Nazi rule will become precious moments of time before the worst was to come. In 1933, the number of Jews in Germany was 505,000, which was less than 1% of the German population. Yet that didn't stop the Nazis ostracising the Jews. One day the Nazis boycotted Jewish businesses, on another, Jewish authors were publicly burnt. Finally, on another day, schools began teaching lessons about Jews being subhuman. But there was one day, just before Hitler became Chancellor, where there was a protection attempt towards Jews, where in 1933, current President Hindenburg had wanted all Jewish war veterans who fought for Germany in the First World War to be protected. However, his attempt was futile because one day the same year, when Hitler came to power, these Jewish veterans were all fired from their jobs and used as a Nazi propaganda tool to push conspiracy theories about Jewish disloyalty. Those who also lost their jobs were Jewish civil servants, lawyers, and teachers, who furthered the disloyalty conspiracy, causing a tolerance by the public of the anti-Jewish laws that would soon make its way into society.
One day in a concentration camp. Auschwitz-Birkenau, perhaps the most notorious and infamous concentration camp of the Holocaust, in which approximately 1.1 million people died in. While we can recognise that this number is staggeringly high, it does not convey the true individuality of those suffering at the hands of the Nazi Party and those partaking in their deeds. Waking up in the barracks, smothered by other people, the Nazis had no regard for any comfort or well-being, herding people into the barracks. It was impossible to practice personal hygiene, the conditions being so foul and inhumane. Food was rationed, and prisoners would consume no more than 600 calories a day. Such low consumption, combined with the strenuous heavy labour many were forced to endure, meant thousands died from exhaustion and malnutrition. However, for some Jews, hope was found in spiritualism. Some exchanged prayers for a day's food, a tiny symbol of the strength they found in their beliefs despite all they were undergoing. Dignity was not provided, the toilets being concrete holes in one room. People were forced to go in front of each other and the guards that surrounded the room. This complete lack of pride a prisoner was forced to suffer was something we can never imagine. This is important to note. We can never truly understand the torture experienced within Auschwitz or any other concentration camp. We will never come close to the ordeals faced by those within, as they are so harrowing that they become almost unimaginable. But we must remember them, all those who lost their lives during the Holocaust and within Auschwitz-Birkenau, to allow them the memory they deserve, and so we don't forget that they were not just victims, they were lives.
The contemporary relevance of the Holocaust. When we learn about the Holocaust, we can often be overwhelmed. We see the statistics, but we fail to see the lives. When we speak about the Holocaust, the families torn apart, the lives lost, we seldom really consider what has actually been lost. And when we think about the Holocaust, we can often forget what could have been if these men, women, and children were not murdered. What brilliant contributions could these millions of extraordinary, ordinary people have made to the world? Think of the knowledge and joy and love and hope that has been lost with their deaths. And think of all that the world has lost since then. Think of the millions of lives obliterated in the numerous genocides that have occurred since the Holocaust, and the lives that are still being extinguished today. I ask you to remember the extraordinary, ordinary people murdered in the Holocaust, but also to remember that genocide is still occurring right now in the present day. Extraordinary, ordinary people are still being murdered. Do not forget them.
Well done, pupils of St Thomas More High School, for their innovative presentation. Thank you. I'm very pleased now to introduce Year 6 pupils of St Stephen's Roman Catholic Primary School who wish to share with us what they have learned about the impact of the Warsaw Ghetto on the Jewish community.
Welcome to the Holocaust Memorial. Today, St. Stephen's RC Primary are going to tell you about the story of the Warsaw Ghetto and how innocent people lost their lives because of their beliefs. In 1939, the Nazis established the largest ghetto in Europe. 380,000 Jewish people were crammed into the slums of Warsaw, which was 1 square mile in size. In realistic terms, 30% of Warsaw's population was squashed into a minuscule 2.4% of Warsaw. In total, there were 840 rooms shared between 500,000 people. That's equivalent to 7 to 10 people per room. Nazis forced the Jewish to build a wall around the ghetto so they couldn't escape. The wall had to be 10 feet tall and topped with barbed wire. If a person was caught escaping, they would be sentenced to death. 80,000 Jewish people died due to deplorable conditions, hypothermia, contagious diseases, starvation, and overcrowding. The Jewish had to wear a white armband with a blue Star of David to identify they were Jewish.
Books, studies, music, and normal everyday life was banned. Jewish people only lived on 200 calories of food each day. That's not even enough to sustain a 5-year-old. 80,000 Jews died, and as a result of the appalling conditions, overcrowding and starvation. Street trading became a necessity on the streets of Warsaw, as people sold their rings, watches, or any sort of jewelry just to make a bit of money. With this money, they would bribe Nazi guards to give them extra food and anyone such as other Jews, guards, and other people outside the ghetto.
My loving parents and my sister moved to Katowice in Poland when I was 7 years old. We had a car which was relatively rare at the time. My life was perfect. On Sundays, I went on outings with my family. August 1939 is when World War II was coming around the corner and my life turned upside down. My German father told me I was going to visit my grandfather in Warsaw, but when I arrived there, I realised that wasn't going to happen. I was going to the biggest ghetto in Europe. I knew death was awaiting me. A few days turned into a few months, and I was only supplied with a little bowl of soup each day. Somehow, I miraculously survived in this death camp and did not live a normal life until 7 years later. When I got home, I found out 32 of my family members were killed or sent to a concentration camp. To this day, I count myself as one of the luckiest people in the world.
People of the Warsaw Ghetto were going to fight against Germany. This surprising attack was organised by the ZOB, which was led by a 23-year-old man called Mordecai Annie Lewis. The Warsaw Uprising lasted for 27 days, 7,000 Jewish people died on the first night, and around 50,000 people were sent to extermination or labour camps. It started on April 19, 1943, and culminated on May 16, 1943, at 8:15 when the Nazis blew up the synagogue. The Jewish people were only armed with pistols and grenades, which were mostly handmade, but some were able to use automatic weapons. On the first day of fighting, they stunned the Germans and forced them to retreat outside the ghetto wall. However, this was short-lived, as the Nazi army soon drafted in reinforcements.
The Holocaust reminds us of the incredible human sacrifice the Jewish community had to endure at the hands of the Nazis. It's our duty to never let future generations forget. St. Stephen's prays for all those lost souls. Amen.
That was a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. They remind us how diverse the presentations from the school are and how we look at life from many different perspectives. But now I'd like to welcome our young mayor, Susie Mackenzie, to say a few words. Susie.
Hello, I'm Susie Mackenzie. I'm the current young mayor for North Tyneside. The theme for this year's Holocaust Memorial Day is One Day, and when I looked into this, I found a quote from Ibby Nil, who is a Holocaust survivor. She said, "You didn't think about yesterday, and tomorrow may not happen. It was only today that you had to cope with, and you got through it the best you could." I think it's a very relevant message for this year's theme. I found a poem too, called One Day at a Time, written by Annie Johnson Flint, which I thought was thought-provoking. It goes like this: one day at a time, with its failures and fears, with its hurts and mistakes, and its weaknesses and tears. With its portion of pain and its burden of care, one day at a time we must meet and must bear. One day at a time, to be patient and strong, to be calm under trial and sweet under wrong. Then its toiling shall pass and its sorrow shall cease. It shall darken and die, but the day shall bring peace. One day at a time, but the day is so long, and the heart is not brave and the soul is not strong. O thou pitiful Christ, be thou near all the way, give courage and patience and strength for the day. Swift cometh his answer, so clear and so sweet. Yea, I will be with thee, thy troubles to meet. I will not forget thee, nor fail thee, nor grieve. I will not forsake thee, I will never leave. Not yesterday's load we are called on to bear, nor the morrow's uncertain and shadowy care. Why should we look forward or back with dismay? Our needs as our mercies are but for the day. One day at a time, and the day is his day. He hath numbered its hours, though they haste or delay. His grace is sufficient, we walk not alone. As the day, so the strength that he giveth his own. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie, for your contribution to today's event. Now it's the turn of the Star of the Sea Roman Catholic Primary School. These Year 5 pupils will share poems and reflections about this year's theme.
We've been learning about the story of a Holocaust survivor, Renee Idnell, and how one day changed her life forever. At the age of only 10 years old, Renee was sent away from her family and her home to live in a strange country, all because of the hatred and persecution of the Jews in Germany by the Nazis. Her family knew the danger they would be in and had to try to escape, but unfortunately they were unable to. Renee's sister, Margaret, was sent to live with her relatives in Sweden, but sadly her brother Alfred was caught by the Nazis and sent to a concentration camp.
Things were getting worse for the Jews, and Renee's parents found out about the Kindertransport, which helped children to escape to Britain. Renee had to leave her family and travel to England on her own. It must have been terrifying for someone the same age as we are now to make that journey on their own. Renee came to England and lived with her aunt, but World War II broke out soon after her parents were trapped in Germany. She never saw them again, but wrote a lot of letters to them and got letters back. Alfred was released from the concentration camp and made it to England to live with Renee, but very sadly her parents were murdered by the Nazis and she never saw them again. We decided to write letters to Renee about how we felt after hearing her story.
Dear Rennie, I was horrified when I heard what happened to you and your family. It is not okay for anyone to be allowed to do that, no matter how powerful they are. It is so sad that at the age of only 10 you had to go on the Kindertransport, but I am so thankful that it was there to help you and other children.
Dear Rennie, your life story is very sad, but it is a great inspiration to keep the flame burning. You must have been terrified without your family, being all alone on the Kindertransport. I think that you were so brave and fearless, and we must make sure that we will never forget so we can stop this from happening again.
Dear Rennie, when I heard your life story, I was speechless. I couldn't believe that you went on a train by yourself when you were only 10 years old. I said to myself, we can't let this happen ever again.
Dear Rennie, I'm flooded with anger because why would anybody kill people because of their religion? I'm flooded with sadness because your brother was in a concentration camp and your sister was sent to Sweden, and at only 10 you had to leave your parents, but I am flooded with joy because you survived.
Dear Rennie, I am so sorry for what happened to you and your family. You must have been really scared going to England all by yourself on the Kindertransport. We will always remember Holocaust Memorial Day and make sure that the flame never goes out. We must make sure that intolerance and hatred ends.
Dear Rennie, I felt sorry when I heard your story. It must have been horrible for you, and it is upsetting to anyone who hears about what happened on that day. That changed your life forever. No one should judge people because of their religion, colour of their skin, because of where they came from. We will never forget and hope that one day the world will be a kinder place where everyone can live together in peace.
Many thanks to the pupils and staff for this contribution from your school. I'd now like to introduce the students from Longmountain High School who wish to share stories about one day.
Hi, I'm Eleanor. And I'm Emily. And we are here to do a brief presentation on the Holocaust for you today.
First thing that appears on screen is this slide, and it says, does anyone know what this image shows? So we'll give you a few seconds to think.
So this is actually a commemorative piece that resides in the Holocaust Memorial Museum, and it's called the Book of Names. It contains the names of 4.2 million murdered Jews. It says their names, the year and place they were born, and where they eventually died as well. The book spans several metres and is bound together in sections, but it's important to note that this is not an accurate representation of every victim of the Holocaust, as many were killed without a trace, with their family and friends dying along with them, and their memories as well.
So, our focus. In November last year, we took part in a specialised course called the Lessons from Auschwitz programme. In the programme, we learned about all aspects of the Holocaust, from individual testimonies to humanising even the perpetrators of this horrendous event. We were also given the chance to have a virtual tour of Auschwitz-Birkenau while hearing from another survivor. Our experience was highly emotive and gave us pause. When hearing from a survivor of the Holocaust, who was Eva Clark, we were taught about the importance of telling other stories. We are likely the last generation who will be able to hear these testimonies firsthand, and therefore it is our duty to make sure these people can live on through our voices. A big focus of the course was humanising the Holocaust, so that is our aim today, even if it's just on a small scale.
So we're going to tell you a little bit about Eva's story, which we were told, just to give you kind of an idea of this kind of humanising the Holocaust, and not everyone's story is exactly the same. So before the Holocaust, Eva's mother Anka lived in Prague with her husband Bernd. They were both of Jewish descent, however did not consider themselves religious and didn't follow many Jewish practices. When the Nazis started to occupy more of Europe and universities were shut down, Anka, who was studying law, was kicked out. Bernd was also, he earned an Iron Cross during the First World War and was an architect. As restrictions grew, they were forced to wear the Yellow Star of David that branded them as Jews and also as the enemy.
So during the Holocaust, in 1941, Bernd and Anka were separated and forced into Nazi ghettos. After some time, she was able to find her husband, and they had their first child together named George in 1944. The Gestapo made them sign a document stating that the baby would be killed if it was born, but he died at 2 months old of pneumonia. In September 1944, Bernd was sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Anka was pregnant again and unaware of the camp. She offered to go with him. She was again separated from Bernd in October, who was later be killed in a Nazi death march in January.
So during the Holocaust again, Anka kept her pregnancy a secret and was selected for slave labour in a nearby factory. She was so malnourished at the time that when she was offered a glass of milk by a farmer, she saw him as her saviour. She would have been actually sent to the gas chambers if they weren't blown up the day before. So Eva talked a lot about her mother being just very, very lucky throughout her whole experience. She then gave birth to Eva in a wagon on the way to a new camp. And 3 days later, that camp was liberated by American forces. Eva also only weighed 3 pounds when she was born.
After the Holocaust, Anka was never one to shy away from telling her experiences. Unfortunately, upon finding her freedom, she found that the rest of her family and Bernds were wiped out during the genocide. Eva has dedicated her life to being a conduit for a mother's story and advocating for human rights around the world.
There's also a little picture on the side that you can see there. So on the left is Eva, and on the right in the blue shirt is her mother, Anka. That's also Eva's 2 sons and 3 grandchildren.
So, in reflection, we must remember that the events of the Holocaust were not straightforward or predictable. Each person has their own unique story. The reach of Jews taken was exponential and probably much more than you may have imagined. It is important that we educate and not neglect this part of history, no matter how hard it may be. We must preserve their memory.
We were also told during the live sessions, I think, if I remember correctly, it was during, we got almost a sermon from a rabbi. He told us that the legacy of the Holocaust is the presence of absence. So that's what we are left with. But thank you for listening, and we hope that you can go on and tell this story to others as we have to you, just as Eva wanted.
Many thanks to the pupils and staff for this contribution from their school. Now it's the turn of St Aidan's Roman Catholic Primary School, where Year 6 pupils will share the poem First They Came by Pastor Niamola.
Good morning. We are from St Aidan's Primary School.
Our mission statement is, come in and learn with Jesus, go out and serve with love.
We have been exploring how we can put our faith in action and serve our community by looking at where other communities live and work well together and why communities break down.
We have been very privileged to have had a visit to our school from Gabrielle Keenan, who has shared with us her experience on living through and surviving the Holocaust, coming to England on the Kinder Transport when she was a little girl.
That one day when she came to visit our school changed all of us. It deepened our understanding of the impact of hatred and prejudice on people.
She told us about the one day she realised things had changed. She also talked about the day she realised things would never be the same again.
Learning about the horror of the Holocaust, we have been shocked how badly friendships, communities, and even a whole society can be broken down easily by prejudice and hatred if people cannot work. We have looked at the meaning of one day and understand how important our actions can be on any given day. We read the famous poem by Pastor Martin Niemöller and wrote a school-life, whole-class version to show exactly how devastating prejudice can be if no one is there to stop it one day.
One day they picked on children wearing glasses. I do not wear glasses, so that day I did not speak out.
One day they came to pick on the people with ginger hair. My hair was blonde, so that day I did not speak out.
One day they came for the people who were refugees. I was born here, so that day I did not speak out.
Next one day they picked on the people who were physically disabled. I'm physically okay, so that day I did not speak. Then one day they came for the people with different coloured skin. My skin was the same colour as theirs, so that day I did not speak out. After that, one day they picked on the people who spoke different languages. I speak just like them, so that day I did not speak out.
Then one day they bullied the children who were poor. My parents are well off, so that day I did not speak out.
Then one day they came for me, but there was no one left to speak out for me.
Gay Kinahan's story is available to read from the Association of Jewish Refugees My Story Project, along with the stories of other survivors of the Holocaust.
One day, there will be no survivors to tell their stories. It is up to us to tell them and make sure no such stories unfold in the future. We are committed to stand up to prejudice, discrimination and hatred wherever we encounter it, as we go out and serve our community with love.
We need to do this every day, because just one day can change someone's life forever.
We hope that in sharing this year's Holocaust Memorial Day service and singing this year's song, that we can make this day one day to effect change.
Many thanks to the pupils for their engaging and thought-provoking interpretation about this year's theme. Many thanks to the pupils for their fantastic efforts and presentations they have shared with us today. Many thanks to all the pupils, teachers, and everyone who's been involved with their presentations today for the fantastic efforts that have been made. I think it shows how diverse the interpretations of the theme can be. No one has been the same, but it has been thought-provoking and stimulating for all of us. Can I please introduce our final presentation from Rabbi Sybil Sheridan, who joins us this year for the first time at our event.
Hello. My name is Sybil Sheridan. I am the rabbi to the Newcastle Reform Synagogue. My parents are German Jewish refugees who fled Hitler's Germany in the 1930s. My father was 18 when he came here. He'd started university in Germany, but when Hitler came to power, all Jews were banned from universities, so he came to study in Manchester. He could not go back to Germany because his citizenship was taken away from him, and so he stayed here, joined the British Army, and next went to Germany as a fighter, fighting for freedom. My mother was just 12 years old when her mother decided it was no longer safe in Germany, brought her to England and left her with a cousin, and then went back there. So imagine my mother at the age of 12, left with people she didn't know, speaking a language she barely understood. They sent her to a boarding school, and she well remembers her first English lesson there. They were studying a play called The Rivals. I don't know if you know it. It was written in the 18th century, and it's very old-fashioned English language and some very odd words. And the teacher asked her to underline anything in the play that she couldn't understand. So apart from the words a and the, my mother underlined every single word. She hated that play for the rest of her life. Today, hopefully, children coming as refugees to this country do get a better understanding from their teachers, and they certainly get extra help in learning English. But the traumas that they experienced, like the trauma that my mother had, witnessing many brutal acts in Germany, those traumas don't go away, in spite of all the special understanding that people require. Kristallnacht epitomized the terror for Jews. Now, as those Jews pass, it is their stories that we must remember. And it is you, the recipients of these stories. They will help you understand something of the plight of refugees today, of those fleeing from countries where brutality is the norm. It is up to you to understand them and to help them. Thank you.
My thanks to Rabbi Sheridan, who concludes our presentations based on the theme One Day for this year's event. One last time, we're going to hear this year's song from the virtual HMD Youth Choir singing Just One Day. Thank you once again to absolutely everybody who has been involved. Our schools are very important to us in North Tyneside. They are our future. They've worked hard today upon the theme of one day. To close today's ceremony, can I now please welcome back the elected Mayor, Norma Redfern, CBE.
I would like to say a huge thank you to everyone for sharing with us today our virtual Holocaust Memorial Day commemorative event. Special thanks must go to everyone who has contributed to and in the preparation of another really memorable event. As always, the HMD event is the result of many, many months of planning. On behalf of the Council, I would like to thank the members of the HMD Working Group, whose efforts helped to make today such a thoughtful and thought-provoking event. And a special thanks to Councillor Muriel Green, who's chair of this committee, who works tirelessly throughout the year to make this happen along with their colleagues. Let us remember to share the stories we've heard and do our best to ensure these kinds of atrocities never, never, ever happen again. Let us make our personal commitment to supporting the efforts of those who are left to rebuild the lives of the victims of genocide, intolerance and prejudice. I would now like to invite you all to join with me, please, to light a candle and reflect on what we've all heard today. Thank you.